Okay, good evening everyone. We are live. Trying the old way of broadcasting again. I think the audio is better synced. Anyway, it's just a better setup this way. So tonight we are doing questions and answers, and it looks like we have 12 questions. I've read through them, some good ones, so I'll go over them. Just one more check, make sure everything's working properly. A little bit blurry. We have audio, we have video. Do we have anybody watching? We are live. Nobody's watching. Stream health not so good. Oh, 5 people watching. Okay, that means someone can see us. Good. All right. Where were we? Questions. So I push this button. And I get a spinning wheel. Okay. The website's not working entirely, it looks like. So again, we should note this, that we're having troubles with the website. That should be addressed, I think. Anyway, I will answer the questions. So we have a lot of mention in Buddhism about devas, ghosts, and people who come in contact with them. How does one know if this is a true valid experience and not just a mental disease like psychosis? Well, I can turn that back on you and ask, how do you know that your regular experience is not a mental disease like a psychosis? You know, you're asking a question that actually is probably deeper, I assume, than you're actually conscious of when you ask it. I think this person is from France, which really, Netherlands. Looks like the French flag. Anyway, Descartes was the famous Westerner who said, you can't really know anything. You can't really be sure of any of your experiences. The only thing you can be sure of is experience. So when we talk about angels and ghosts, we're on the level of concepts at any rate. And there is no ultimate way to discern whether you are merely hallucinating. Now there are conventional ways, of course. You can confirm your experience with someone else. Did you see that? If lots of people saw it, well, then it's much more likely to be real. Of course, you could just be dreaming up all those other people as well, right? I mean, it gets the thought experiment, we can extend it. How do we know this isn't delusion, that isn't delusion? It's not a very, I suppose, satisfying answer. We want to know, are angels real, are ghosts real? I mean, I think they are, but I don't think it's an incredibly important question. I mean, the question you ask is useful to help us understand what's behind this concept of reality, but just to know whether they are conventionally real or not is not that useful. Oh, I shouldn't. Wait, okay. I tried reloading the page. See if that helps. Here we are. Okay, now they are working. The last couple of months I'm watching pride and things related to pride, like hurt that arises after I use words I said or actions I took. Hurt that arises after words I said or actions I took have been rejected or criticized. The hurt only arises if words or actions were taken by me as mine and not when it was just speaking, hearing, and doing. Yeah, I mean that's pretty clear, right? You can only be hurt by something if you have if there's an accompanying sense of identity, of me, right? Of injury. It's an extrapolation. You extrapolate in so many levels, not just understanding what someone says or does, but extrapolating it as being bad or as being hurtful, as being contrary to what you want. I mean, it also has to do with craving for appreciation, craving for praise. It's a very simple human desire that we get from very young, right? We receive praise and it makes us feel good, and so we start to associate praise with happiness. So when you just experience it, you're no longer connecting it to this system in the brain which says, hey, that's going to make me happy, or that's destroying what makes me happy, or that's getting in the way of what makes me happy, and then you suffer. What's the difference between hindrances and defilement? Some states are a hindrance as well as defilement. So the Buddha used two different levels of teaching and understood two different levels of reality. One is sort of pedagogical, or however you say that, for teaching purposes. And the other is ultimate, like what really exists. So the Buddha has so many lists that overlap. You know, if you look at the 37 Bodhipakkhiya Dhamma, the 37 states that partake in enlightenment, well, mindfulness appears 3 times, I think. Let me see, 5 times. Mindfulness appears 5 times in 5 different lists. Yeah, 5. Effort appears 5 times, I think. I mean, I'm not specific here, but like many times. Each of those lists has effort in it. 5 of them have effort, 5 of them have mindfulness, and so on. And the defilements are the same. We're studying this in the Abhidhamma right now. This is the chapter we're on. We're talking about, or we're just about to, I think we haven't started, but we're about to talk about, that's right, sorry, we have started talking about the various lists of bad things and then good things as well. And you can see the incredible overlap. So when the Buddha was talking about hindrances, it wasn't so much about talking about 5 distinct bad things. He was talking about bad things grouped in terms of how they obstruct meditation practice specifically. That's what the word hindrance is meant to convey. That they get in the way of your practice, they get in the way of your cultivation of wholesomeness and freedom from suffering. That's all. There's no difference between doubt in this list and doubt in that list. Unless you're talking about specific types of doubt, but generally not. What do the online meditation lessons go like? Are they different depending on the issue of the student? How is it different from just self-meditation? So, honestly, I don't put too much effort into teaching during the online course because the meditator isn't putting in all that much effort themselves. I mean, honestly, the teacher's role is not a large one anyway. So in the online courses, there's not a lot of help. I've actually had one or two students get quite disappointed that I wasn't somehow teaching them more, but honestly, that comes, my claim is that comes much more from them expecting to be enlightened by someone else, or to be enlightened through theory, which can't happen. Those people, just tonight someone finished the course and was appreciative, and I think it is less than people actually expect, and I'm not giving them Dhamma talks during the class, but what you do get is a support, someone to keep you going and confirm that you're actually practicing, but also more importantly, you get a technique. Every week we give a new exercise, and there's a progression to it. And I do teach. There is question and answer during the sessions, but it's mostly just reassuring and keeping you on track. I mean, there's not that much to the practice. It's not that complicated. It's just hard, and it's a real skill and a process that you have to go through. So it's about taking you through that, and in my mind, really preparing the meditators for an intensive practice. I mean, it is great that we're able to reach people who won't have an opportunity to practice intensively, but it's much more fulfilling to actually see people who have done the online course then go on to take the actual intensive course, and they're much better prepared having done the online course. So it's not useless. I mean, you can see the benefit, especially when someone then comes and does an intensive course. So much easier, so much more streamlined. I mean, partially because they've already accepted, and they're the people who have accepted that this is a useful practice. If someone thinks, well, they're not sure about the practice, well, they wouldn't have done an online course. But a person who's done the online course is someone who is really ready to do the foundation course. Okay, this one's a little bit, I mean, I get where it's coming from. I'm not entirely clear about the points of it. So, I kind of stress, because I tried not to control my breath. When I say rising, sometimes I'm not really sure about the time that the rising is going to last. So I say rise, and I finish the inhalation so I don't finish the word. So okay, it ends too quickly, and you find yourself not having finished the noting. It kind of implies that the noting is not a proper response, or is not properly related to the experience, because if it's not in sync, then what was the point of it? I mean, what was the mindset behind actually noting? I mean, the noting should be, now I'm seeing it rise, now I'm seeing it fall. It should be an observation, or associated with an observation. On the other hand, clearly the mind is not under our control. You can't force the mind to be that way, force the mind to just observe, because that would be forcing. And so we do a lot of forcing, trying to get our minds to be this way or that way, or how we think they should be during the meditation. And even trying not to control is problematic, because it involves control. So one aspect, one answer, of course, is you don't have to say rising, because sometimes the breath is shallow. So in that aspect of it, you can just say rise, fall, if it's too shallow sometimes. But also you should try to look at it the other way. Instead of being concerned that the breath isn't quick enough, make the noting in sync with the movement. Rising, falling. The ing should be when it finishes, whenever that is. And thirdly, just being patient with it when it's not the way you wish it to be or expect it to be, not the way you think it should be. because that's the nature of the mind. You can't control it. It doesn't go according to the way we wish. So a big part of the practice is becoming flexible, which leads to release, leads you to stop clinging, to stop craving, to let go. I've gotten this question before and I almost don't want to take it, but I think it's okay. What is the most common mistake or difficulty you've seen people of Western thought make or have in comparison with other people from other idiosyncrasies? And I think my answer is usually along the lines of, it depends much more on the individual, but there certainly are. What's really interesting is you can find cultural likenesses, similarities among people of similar cultures. So Korean people are all different, but in some ways are similar. Scandinavian people in some ways are similar. German people, I find, are in some ways similar. British people, maybe, in some ways similar. I don't actually get so many British. Some British, that's true, and Australian people. Canadian people are in some ways similar, American people. So it's much more like that. But those idiosyncrasies don't have that big of an impact on the practice. Sometimes I've thought that, wow, German people are pretty good at meditating, for example. Canadian people are fairly weak and non-committal, which is problematic when you're trying to, really work hard at something. But it's such a generalization. And I certainly wouldn't want to generalize Westerners because, I don't know, if I was going to, there's a lot less confidence, because you certainly see a marked confidence among Buddhists, people of Buddhist origin. Not all of them, but it's a good generalization that you can sit many, many different Thai people down and, boy, they'll practice. Sri Lankan people are different. Those are the two groups I've had the most contact with. But yeah, I don't have much more to say on that, I don't think. What role do resolutions, determinations play in the practice? Well, determination helps set your mind on something, helps give you direction. I mean, it's not necessary, and it's certainly not the driving force in a practice, but it's a useful tool. The Buddha used it to making determinations. It's an old tradition that we have, that in the practice we make different determinations, lots of different determinations. There are determinations, lots of different ones. Monks make determinations sometimes. It's quite useful to... It's not sufficient. It's not like you can say, may I become enlightened tonight, or I'm going to become enlightened tonight. It's not like that's going to be the driving force, it's not sufficient. But proper and realistic determinations are helpful. It's just one tool. Does a meditator take action that's appropriate rather than taking action based on a need or a want? I mean, do they? Well, sometimes. You mean, does an enlightened person? I would say yes. But meditators, well, they're meditating for a reason. The reason is they don't have everything right yet. If they're not yet enlightened, sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. What difficulties did you face when you became a monk, and how did you solve them? Can you share your experiences, if you don't mind? Well, I suppose, as a monk, lots of difficulties. So the biggest difficulty I had in the beginning was not easily being able to fit in, and probably not easily being able to be a monk without feeling proud of it. Because in Asian Buddhist societies, you're often treated quite specially, in Thailand especially. Probably just Thailand or Burma maybe, but Thailand definitely. You're often treated quite well, and it's easy to get a big head over that. Ironically, no? You become a monk to let go of ego, and yeah, it's easy to gain big ego. So I got in some trouble. Well, to say the least, I got in trouble at the monastery. I don't think it was entirely, I mean, in my defense, I think I wasn't the only one, but I certainly had my share of trouble. Causing trouble, causing disturbances, feeling self-righteous, feeling righteous about, I mean, it can be a mess sometimes in a meditation center. Everyone's trying to better themselves and trying to not judge each other, so you let people in, and then there's so many issues. There's issues of money that you find people come for all the wrong reasons because you have a famous teacher, so they want part of the fame. People becoming famous and then getting big egos and so on. And money, money. That was a big part of why I decided in the end to give up money. Not the only reason, but so much money in monasteries. It's disheartening, to say the least. But yeah, so I made a lot of mistakes and learned from them over time. Maybe not as fast as I should have. I ended up leaving and trying to start a meditation center somewhere else, and then failing at that, and then going somewhere else, and then failing at that. Often reacting to other monks. I went to one place and I just didn't like the way I felt like they were destroying the meditation center by changing the focus. And I got quite vocal and critical about that. And, it was a mistake. I should have been more mindful and more mindful. But, it wasn't, there were other factors, and I was certainly not alone, I think, in my unmindfulness. So we tried. I've done good work in various places. I have to defend myself that way. Wow, some really good work at Doi Sutep. 2 years of just really good work. A lot of problems as well, and mistakes. And then this place in the forest, the one I'm thinking of, a couple of different places in the forest, we did some good work. Helped some people. But could never really start a meditation center. And the big problem I was running up against was bureaucratic. I mean, that was my focus, was on trying to overcome the bureaucratic hurdles to being a Westerner trying to teach in a foreign country. Foreign to me, like I didn't have a passport and wasn't a part of the culture and was expected to play the part of a visitor, really, a guest. So they wouldn't let me start my own center. At one point I got the permission to be the head of a center and reassurance that I would be the head of the center. And that sounds somewhat egotistical. I don't think at that point I was really terribly egotistical, but hey, But the point was, yes, now there will be no craziness, right? If I'm in charge, I don't need to have a big head about it, but at the very least there will be no craziness. Turns out within a week or so there was craziness, and the one monk who was staying there took a broom to my head and was just about to hit me over the head with his broomstick. It was really a confrontation. I wasn't angry. I was a little bit hopeless at that point, where this was the last straw, and this just wasn't going to work. So that was it, and I went back to the forest. No, I went to Wat Rampung at that point, actually, I think, and had some good time there. Taught there a bit. Eventually ended up leaving Thailand. I went back to stay with my teacher, and then went to Thailand. Where did I say? Ended up leaving Thailand. Ended up going to America. And I spent a couple of years there. Eventually was put in jail for a night. Someone thought I was a streaker. I went to Sri Lanka then. And Sri Lanka is a wonderful place to live. Got dengue, whatever you say that. The dengue. Almost died, I think. I mean, it was probably not real danger, but little danger. And based on a lot of the health issues, just decided it wasn't and the infrastructure issues, it wasn't a great place to start an international meditation center, which, for better or for worse, I was kind of committed to doing. During this time, I started doing YouTube videos, of course, and that was a big part of what I was doing. Moved to Winnipeg, spent a year there, tried to start something, and in the end I made mistakes there as well. Just really trying and perhaps trying too forcefully to make things right, make sure things started off on the right foot, but ultimately just left because Winnipeg's not I don't know why I was in I mean, I know why I was there. There was the only place I was invited at that point. But ultimately decided Ontario would be a better place, and so I'm in Ontario. It's going well. We have a small center. But being able to teach constantly and have this sort of perpetual open house, so people don't have to start a course at a specific time, it's not too shabby. It's not like you have 100 people doing a course all at once, but if you have 3-4 people doing a course consistently throughout the year, it's pretty good. Especially we're working completely on donations, and not donations as payment of the course, but donations by people who, for whatever reason, want to support what we do. And being able to do that, I don't feel like... Anyway, the question was about obstacles. So, I told a story, I guess, instead, but talked about obstacles. If I want to summarize that, what are the obstacles? Culture, defilement, of course, money, but more the greed involved with money. Not having a passport for a Buddhist country, perhaps, is a big issue. In Sri Lanka, I went to the immigration and I said to them, what would it take to become a Sri Lankan citizen? And they just laughed at me. Kind of perplexed, actually. You mean like get a visa? No. I want to get a Sri Lankan passport. I asked a lawyer in Colombo about it, and he shook his head and he said, everyone wants to leave this country. You want to get a Sri Lankan passport? Oh, no, I shouldn't. That's really kind of unfortunate. I mean, Sri Lanka there's great things about it. I think those were perhaps bad examples. There's a lot of people, I think, who appreciate Sri Lanka. Sri Lankans who do. But, it was not very easy to do. Canadian passport's okay as well. I think a big one is organized institutionalization, just this complaint that a lot of religious people have, that institutionalized religion is prone to corruption in many different ways. Yeah. Obstacles. I mean, I tell people who are interested in becoming a monk, Being a monk in this day and age is not like being a monk in ancient times. You have to get your head around that. The majority of monks now use money, drive cars. It's not the majority, but many in the West drive vehicles. But beyond that, I mean, just living as a monk, it's not like it used to be. And you have to be a little bit creative, and you have to be kind of open to not necessarily living in the forest. There are still places you can do it, absolutely. But there are differences that you have to contend with. So, anyway. Not a question about meditation, so I probably should stop there. Again, not a question about meditation, but, it's a question everyone wants answers to. Do you think the sexist rules in the Bhikkhuni Vinaya are valid? You have two different questions here. Do you think those rules should be followed even if they are valid? Do I think they're valid? I accept that there may be potentially the reality that some of them are not valid. The big problem I have, that a lot of people have expressed, is that I'm not the Buddha to decide whether they're valid or not. My suspicion, if you want to call it that, or my openness to the potential for them to be invalid is not enough for me to invalidate them. If a rule is sexist, does that invalidate it? I mean, I think you have to differentiate. You can differentiate. Do you have to? Maybe you don't have to. You can differentiate between a rule that is functionally discriminatory. I don't know functionally, but I'm just going to make that word up, or make that term up. Functionally sexist may not be the proper term, but let's use it. And emotionally, let's say, sexist, like where someone is partial in some way to one gender or the other, meaning they feel like one is superior. So rules that put one group junior to the other are not necessarily a problem. Now, it's unfortunate that they happen to be along gender lines, but the rationale is there. I mean, keeping the group separate was always it seems to be an important part of the system. And if you're going to keep them separate, you have two distinct groups, but you then have to work on matters of respect. So some people have said, well, couldn't you just have mutual respect? And yeah, you certainly could. You don't. I mean, in Buddhism, you have a very strict single chain of authority, and it puts the females below the males. There's no question about that. And I'm not going to 100% defend that. As I said, I'm open to potential movement there, or flexibility. That being said, I'm not the person to ask, because I'm a white male, let's say, or at the very least I'm a male. But from my limited, prejudiced, biased point of view, it's possible to be perfectly harmonious with one gender junior to the other, because we have that system already in place with the male gender. I mean, we don't have many bhikkhunis in the world. We have one here, which is in a different tradition, but within the male monastic community, we have junior, senior already. And there's no, it's not a meritocracy. You don't put the person who is best at the top by any means. A new monk who is an arahant has to bow down to a corrupt monk to a certain extent, unless they go beyond, to become really corrupt. But a monk who's lazy and so on, still is senior to the enlightened one. So it has nothing to do with merit. It's a chain of it's kind of like a chain of seniority, I guess. Who bows to who? And I mean, to be honest, who cares who bows to who? I've bowed down to monks who I really never respected. But I bowed to them because they were senior, and that's the rule. So I feel somewhat confident in saying, I know it sounds awful to a modern it sounds potentially unpleasant, but it's just functional. And there's no sense among there's not necessarily any sense of actually feeling this superiority or believing in some kind of superiority, because it has nothing to do with superiority, inferiority. It really does have nothing to do with that. That being said, I have heard a heck of a lot of sexist comments. So that you might still find problematic, but definitely what is problematic is the sexism, where people say that women, and this is a quote from a Western monk, I think, that women have special problems, I think is what he said. Western monk. I mean, I'm a person who is not born in a Buddhist culture, not even born in an Asian culture. But if you go to Thailand, I mean, it was, when I was there, rampant. Everyone believed that women were not capable of being monastics, and so on and so on. I don't think the Buddha ever thought such a thing. There is one fairly sexist-seeming comment that he gives. I don't know really how to interpret that. I don't know that I'm entirely comfortable with it, but I don't know. As I said, I'm not a Buddha to really understand what's going on here. I mean, I could postulate that women at the time of the Buddha were generally, in broad strokes, problematic. Why? Because they were sheltered, perhaps. Because they were indoctrinated into being good wives. So everything they were taught was how to live the household life, etc., etc. And you could argue that, I think, that it was going to be hard to incorporate women into the monastic system, given what it meant to be a woman in India at the time. It's a big deal what it means to be the gender that you are, right? Because what is it? It's mostly just social construct. What does it mean to say you're a man or a woman? We place so much weight on our chromosomes, whatever that even, I guess that's our DNA, right? And our sexual organs, right? Our reproductive organs and our body shape. How is our chest shaped, for example? How is our face shaped? How is our voice box formed? Based a lot on our chromosomes, I guess. But those don't mean a lot. They don't mean a heck of a lot. So that's not to say that we should just discard it, because social constructs are, practically speaking, an issue. The problems that a woman is going to face are potentially, not to a huge degree, but the mental problems that a woman is going to face are potentially different from the mental problems, and I'm not weighing one as stronger or weaker. I don't personally think that women's problems are, generally speaking, heavier than men's problems from my experience. seriously the problems that some men have with meditation and with their own lust and so on, and their egos and so on, it can often be much greater than some women. So I think it's all rubbish to suggest that generally speaking women are more problematic than men, etc., etc., and so on. So in summary, rules are rules, and I've said this before, I mean, generally in Buddhism, we're not afraid, in monastic Buddhism, we're not afraid of rules. We're not concerned that we have too many rules. I mean, no, most monastics don't say, boy, I wish I only had half these rules. We're mostly like, give me more rules. It's hard when, why don't they have the same rules I have? For sure, I get that. I mean, as best I can from my position, my privileged position. I don't have ultimate conclusions about this, and I think perhaps there aren't very good, definite conclusions. I guess what I would say is it's not the most important thing in Buddhism. Are you keeping all these minor rules? Are you eating garlic? Are you not eating garlic, for example? Not my biggest concern as a Buddhist monastic. Even though I think garlic is forbidden to all of us, except as a medicine. So yeah, I don't think too much about the sexist aspect. When it comes up, I try to have an open mind and not judge people for keeping or not keeping rules relating to gender. There's a lot to say about gender in issues in Buddhism. We don't have a perfect record, of course, in that regard, but it's more complicated than just saying, forget the genders. I don't agree with that either. It is an issue, because sexuality, however, no matter what you say, it's entangled with gender. Still, as always. After practicing single-pointed meditation and becoming better at it, how should I proceed with insight meditation? I mean, I'll take you through my course, no matter what you've been through, but if you want to go the route of the samatha yanika, the what we call Jeta Vimutti, then you would actually use the jhana factors as your object of insight meditation and see them as impermanent suffering and non-self. The jhana factors, the physical base that they're based on, etc., etc. You see something, it would if it's a disk of light that you're absorbed in, you would say seeing, for example. Oh, I got people slipping in new questions. I'm talking a lot. Okay, this one's old. Sayadaw, I'm not sure which Sayadaw. I assume you're probably talking about Mahasi Sayadaw. Sayadaw just means like teacher, so it's better not to use the word Sayadaw to refer to a specific teacher. But I assume you're talking about Mahasi, because he did talk about moving slowly and steadily. From your videos, I get the impression you don't consider it as important. I think I do consider it important. I mean, overly slowly, some centers require you to walk to the dining room as if you're meditating, I don't expect that, and I don't think that's necessarily that's not my idea of a proper meditator, but moving slowly and steadily for sure. I mean, at the meditation center, you're talking about our meditation center, most meditators move pretty quickly. The meditation center, I assume you're talking about ours, so this is someone I don't know. I guess they maybe have been to our center, so they can say. Well, they shouldn't move pretty quickly. If anyone's describing our meditators as moving pretty quickly, then it's a mistake of our meditators. That being said, over time, it works itself out. The meditator stays here for a while and they just naturally move slower. There's nothing wrong with moving quickly. You can be mindful running, right? It's just harder, and moving quickly is often a sign of unmindfulness. Okay, we got new questions. I think I'm going to save them. So thank you all for your new... No, that's not fair, is it? I'll field them, because it means you're here, right? It means you're interested. At what point should you stop trying to mend a broken relationship with a parent? I mean, I think trying is something that should always be proportionate to one's current state. So you should never have a mindset of stop trying. You should always respond to the situation. Is it appropriate to try? And in relation to your parents, whenever the opportunity arises, I think the proper response is to try. But it takes many different forms. Sometimes try just means try to be as mindful as you can. I mean, most of the time, honestly. In most situations, be as mindful as you can is the best advice anyone can give, because the rest really falls into place. But trying to mend a broken relationship with your parents, I don't know. I think it just means actions, individual actions. And I think that should never really end. It's not that you should expect to ever mend a relationship. But your general attitude towards things should always be towards mending. I always think back, it's a common story I tell of this woman who was raped by her father. I mean, that happens. What do you do? What should someone do who's been violated in the worst possible way by their parent? How should they relate to that person? You talk about broken relationship? How's that for a broken relationship? I mean, at some point you might just say, there is no relationship. There's no potential at that point for mending the relationship. There's nothing to be mended. It's broken. I don't know that I would say that. And this person, what do you tell this person? But you take a Buddhist attitude. I mean, there's no denying that in Buddhism, even if someone violates you in the worst possible way, you're supposed to feel compassion for them. It's easy to say. It's obviously very difficult to do, but it doesn't change the fact that it's the right answer. So the thing about parents is we have a strong bond with them. It's not just imaginary. No matter whether it's bad or good, we have a strong, and by bond I don't necessarily mean good. We can have a strong bad bond, and that can be the reason why we were born into the family, not because we loved each other. It could be because we hated each other. It could be because we were evil and awful to each other, and that's why we have to be born together again. But it's strong, and so it's always going to be something in our lives. It's always going to be something that we should be conscious of, our parents. Be conscious of that fact, not necessarily going out of our ways to better it, but conscious that it's always going to come back psychologically and physically. We're always going to be, and of course it's different for everyone. Everyone has unique relationships, but generally speaking, parents are a big one. So I hope that helps. Once we deeply see desire as the cause of suffering, how do we find the impetus to live active lives in the world? What is the source of energy for one who sees that ultimate satisfaction cannot be found in the fulfillment of desires? Well, there isn't really one. Why do you think Buddhist monks are engaged in meditation? Why do you think the Buddha spent a lot of his time with his eyes closed meditating? There isn't an impetus to live active lives in the world. So I'm not sure what you were looking for. You can't have your cake and eat it too. It's one or the other. You want to live in the world, you want to have ambitions and be enlightened, it's not possible. Those two mutually incompatible things. No. So, long story short, someone has been wrongly accused and is seemingly being punished for it. Why is it that I do good with my children and with myself, but what I get in return is nothing but the opposite? So cause and effect doesn't work as simply as that. You can't just do good and expect the universe to give you flowers and rainbows. I mean, the simple answer is it's much more complicated than that. We've got past life stuff to deal with. But I would say more specifically, most of what we have to deal with now is already pretty predetermined. It's not destiny or fate, but it's just heavy stuff. So the light stuff that you're doing now, like telling the truth, being good to your kids, it's not as weighty as it's not even that it's not as weighty. It's that it's overwhelmed by the efficacy of karma that's already ripened. It's like if you commit a crime and are put in jail, but then you spend all your time in jail following the rules, following the law, and then you complain about, why am I still in jail? I mean, it's not exactly what you're complaining, but it's similar. You can't complain that you're still in jail. I mean, you know why you're still in jail. Just because you do good doesn't mean you're suddenly set free. Now, of course, in jail there's this thing called early parole, etc. So yes, it does, and that's how karma works as well. It is ameliorative. No, it does help and ameliorate your situation. I mean, it does get better because of the good things you do. Let's turn this on its head and say, what would it have been like if, met with these terrible charges that just seem completely unfair? I mean, horrible, really, that you're being accused of such awful things. But suppose, given that situation, you were then horrible to your children, beat them or yelled at them or just neglected them or etc., or started taking drugs or whatever some parents do. Do you think your situation now would be the same? I mean, absolutely not. Your mental situation, your physical situation, it would have been a lot worse. So comparatively speaking, there's no question that you're being a good mother, I assume, to these children is a good thing. I mean, it has good results. It doesn't make all your bad luck and make the bad, not luck, but make the bad circumstances go away. But there's no question that it's still the right thing to do, and that the results of it are going to be positive. See, I mean, I don't think this is all that. Hopefully you can see that it's a common question. Why are things not puppies and rainbows or whatever when I'm doing all these good deeds? I'm discouraged, and not puppies and rainbows, but why are things not getting better? When in fact, there's no question that things are better because of the good things that you're doing. And compared to, as I said, you're doing bad instead, would that have had the same result? That being said, I think one aspect of karma that people don't realize is that as human beings, this isn't it, but first of all, as human beings, we have incredible potential. It's like a power, a strength, energy that we have accrued by virtue of whatever it was that led us to be human. I mean, just the goodness that's required to have this brilliant mind, compared to an animal mind, a brain that just works and functions, bodies that are able to, etc., etc. We have a lot of power. And that's what comes from good karma. Now, the thing people don't realize, the thing we generally miss, is that good karma gives you power. It doesn't directly make you enlightened, but it leads to what are objectively called good things, like power, or mostly some kind of power. That power can very easily be used for evil. So you and your ex-husband both have power. It sounds like, if you're to be believed, assuming that what you're telling me is the truth, and no reason you have to lie to me, obviously, it seems like your ex-husband is using his power for evil, which is, it's perfectly possible. No question he's going to benefit from that power. He can steal, he can lie, he can cheat, he can engage in hedonistic pursuits his whole life and just benefit from it. Unfortunately, for him, pleasure and power and all the good things that come from good karma, as I said recently, don't lead to more pleasure and power and happiness. It's goodness that does that. Goodness leads to power. So that power that he's stored up is going to run out. The consequences of his evil are going to catch up with him. I mean, they already are. It's already corrupting his mind, certainly. You can't escape. Evil is evil. I mean, that's why it's evil, because it corrupts your mind. It's awful to be such a person. So, as Udi, my friend who passed away, he was an Israeli monk. He always said, Noach, I tell you this, no one can escape their karma. And he said it with such conviction. It was a joy to hear him say it. He said, I'm sure of one thing. No one can escape their karma. It's true. Anyway, hope that's helpful. I wish you all the best. I mean, it certainly doesn't solve your situation. But what I wanted to say in regards to that is that if you look on the broader picture, and if you are able to reassure yourself that, oh yeah, right, I really am better by being a good person, there's no question, even though it's not solving this aspect of my life. If you're able to see that, then to some extent you're able to let go of this particular set of circumstances. I mean, there's no other way. It's trivializing to say, perhaps, and perhaps even sounds patronizing, but ultimately you have to see the bigger picture. Beyond, sometimes the the particulars of the situation mean my life as a human being. I mean, it gets that big that you have to learn to let go of your life. For in some instances, you're going to be killed, right? You're in a situation where people have a gun to your head, etc., etc. And the only escape, the only proper answer is to let go of your life, is to stop clinging to it, and to see the bigger picture that really, yeah, okay, so I die, etc., etc. I mean, your situation is not life or death, I hope, but you'll be in many different situations. And take this woman who was raped by her father, and I'm sorry to keep coming back to her, but what do you do in that situation? Obviously, you try to get out. What if you can't? What if you, as a Buddhist meditator, are assaulted and raped? It happened to an arahant bhikkhuni once. Well, more than one time, I'm sure, but I'm not sure. It perhaps could have happened more than once. No, I mean, there are stories, different stories of it happening. What do you do in that situation, When, yeah, you struggle, yeah, you try to get away. What if you can't? What if you're tied up? What if you're drugged? What's the answer? So the Buddhist answer to difficulty, to problem, is not to try and make it better, but to free ourselves from the particulars of our situations. To stop seeing that our circumstances are the problem, and to learn to see that our reactions are the only thing that can cause us suffering. Experiences have no power over us. Easy to say, but of course very difficult to realize, to actualize. But I hope that helps. So now I see no more questions, and I'm going to go with that. I hope the broadcast worked. Back to the old, it was crashing, right? So I couldn't actually use this broadcast software. And tonight I Googled a little more, purged some config files, reinstalled the software based on advice, and voila, it worked. Magic. So that's all for tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. Wish you all the best.